Hello everyone, my name is Abhishek and welcome back to my channel. And welcome to one more episode of AWS Zero to Hero series. In this video, we'll try to understand and deep dive into the concept of AWS EC2. Let me tell you that EC2 is one of the most widely used and one of the most popular services that AWS provides. So it is very important for you to understand both the theory and practical part of EC2 instances. That's the reason why in today's video, I'll not only teach you the theory part of EC2, but by the end of this video, you will learn how to create an EC2 instance, how to connect to that created EC2 instance, and how to deploy an application onto the EC2 instance. Finally, I'll also show you how to use this or access this application from outside world. That means you have deployed this application inside the EC2 instance of your AWS platform, but still you will be able to access this application from outside world, that is from your laptop or any other place in the world. So the practical part is going to be interesting because this is your first application that you are deploying onto EC2 instance. Before that, definitely you should understand the theory part. As part of theory, we will learn what is an EC2 instance, why you need to use EC2 instance, why is it very popular. We'll try to see what are the different types of EC2 instances, and finally understand the concept of regions and availability zones. Because we have so many things to learn, let's quickly jump onto the video and understand what is an EC2 instance first. Okay, so the word or the term EC2 represents elastic cloud compute, right? So what does it represent? EC2 represents elastic cloud compute. Some people might feel that you already know this, but to keep everybody on the same page, it is very important for us to start right from the basics, and eventually as we go through the series, we'll definitely deep dive into some complicated topics, and maybe you might not be knowing few things about EC2. So please be patient with us and watch the video till the end. So elastic cloud compute. Now there are three words in this, right? First one is elastic cloud and compute. The word compute means that you are requesting AWS to provide you a compute instance, which is a combination of CPU, RAM, and disk. So technically, you are asking AWS to provide a virtual server, right? So when you request AWS to give you an EC2 instance, what exactly are you requesting? You are requesting AWS to provide you a virtual server. Now, what is a virtual server? I explained multiple times previously, but just to give you a very simple overview, virtual server, let's take a physical server. Personally, let's take your laptop, and your laptop is something, it's a physical server, and you are the only one who is using it, right? Let's say you want to use this laptop. It has to be divided by 2 to 3 people. So what you can do is you have to install a hypervisor on top of your laptop, and you can create some logical isolated virtual machines so that not just you, but multiple people can use your laptop. So your laptop is a very small thing. Whereas if you talk about a server comes up with a huge resources. So if you use this concept of hypervisor and virtual machines, you can take one physical server and share it amongst multiple people. And the same thing AWS does. So when you request AWS for an EC2 instance, AWS has multiple physical servers across the world. So it has physical servers, data centers in US, in Europe, in India, and multiple places. When you ask AWS to give me an EC2 instance in this specific region of the world, what it will do is it will take this request to the hypervisor that AWS has, or the virtualization platform that AWS has, and it will give you a virtual machine. So that is AWS, that is elastic cloud compute. So you understood what is compute. Now what does cloud represent here? Of course, AWS is a public cloud platform. That's why it means a cloud compute instance, or a cloud virtual machine instance that you are getting. Now what does elastic represent here? So the word elastic, whenever you use AWS, you will notice that there are multiple resources or multiple services that AWS provides, and it has a prefix term called elastic. Now why there is prefix to some of the services in AWS with elastic, and why some of the services does not have this prefix? So the answer is very simple. Whenever AWS provides you a service, that can be scaled up or scaled down. That means this service is elastic in nature, where you can increase the resources, decrease the resources, or use this resource in any way. In that sense, AWS calls these services as elastic services. For example, you have elastic cloud compute, you have elastic Kubernetes service, elastic beanstalk, elastic load balancer. So you have lot of services on AWS with prefix with this term called elastic. So finally, you might have understood what does this mean now? Elastic cloud compute. That means you are asking AWS to give me a virtual machine on your cloud platform, which is elastic in nature. That's why it is called as EC2. There are two C's here. In shortcut, we call it as EC2. Two C's represents C2. Now, I hope you understood the concept of what EC2 instance is. So to just summarize and explain you in one line, EC2 means elastic cloud compute, where you are requesting AWS, the public cloud provider, to give you an virtual machine or to give you a virtual server, which is elastic in nature. And this term in general is called as a compute. That's why we call it elastic cloud compute. Now let's try to understand the why aspect. Okay, now Abhishek, you told me what is an EC2 instance, but why should I use an EC2 instance? Right? So what is the advantage if I use an EC2 instance? Of course, you have advantage, that is, instead of creating these EC2 instances, let's say as a DevOps engineer, you start creating instances, you start installing your own hypervisor. You can tell me that, okay, Abhishek, I'll go to IBM or HP and buy a physical server. And on top of it, I'll install my own hypervisor and I'll start creating these virtual machines and I'll start giving it to DevOps engineers, developers or QA engineers. Let's say there are 1,000 requests. Okay, so what you will do is, using the virtualization platform, probably you will write some shell scripts or you will do something and you will create this 1,000 virtual machines. But now let us see, as a DevOps engineer, what are your activities after you create. Okay, creating is easy. Probably you will write a simple shell script and you will create EC2 instances, 1,000, 10,000, I mean virtual machines, how many ever you want. But after creating, you have to timely, that means every now and then you have to upgrade these virtual machines. Right? You have to verify the versions. Every now and then you have to upgrade these versions, verify that they don't have any security issues, right? And verify if there is any issue, like, for some reason, the server has gone down and the developers or the QA people will say that, hey, something is not working, the server has gone down. Now, to manage 1,000 resources like this, it will be a huge headache. If you are a one single DevOps engineer, then managing 1,000 servers, always checking the upgrades, security issues, and if the server is up or not, probably you will end up wasting your whole day just doing this activity as a DevOps engineer or system administrator. So one of the major advantage to moving towards the public cloud platform is to get rid of this maintenance, right? So instead of dedicated people managing or looking into the issues, upgrades, and security of the virtual machines, AWS will take care of this entire thing for you. So what has gone down? The management effort. And again, the another advantage is that the cost as well. So if you are doing this thing at your end, because you will do it at a very small scale, whereas AWS is doing this at a very huge scale. So AWS technically is used today by a lot of organizations, and AWS has a lot of servers. They have already purchased these things and they do it. If they do a lot of effective virtualization. So for that reason, AWS gets these things for very less cost, and you will buy these things from AWS in a concept of pay as you go. So let's say you don't want these servers to be up during the night. You don't want these servers to be up during Christmas. You don't want these servers to be up during Diwali because nobody is using it. So in such cases, what you can simply do is you can shut down these servers and AWS will not ask you for money for the time period where you have shut down these servers. Whereas if it were your own servers, you were creating on your physical machines, you have to anyways pay for it. You have already paid for it because you have already purchased it. So two reasons, one is the maintenance and one is the cost. That's one of the main reasons why people are moving towards EC2 instances and why people are moving towards the EC2 public cloud compute instances. I hope you understood this one. And the other aspect, the elastic thing, you can also do it physically. Like you can add additional volumes, you can decrease the volumes, you can increase or decrease the RAM size and all. Similarly, on AWS platform also, you can do it. Now, once we understood what and why an EC2 instance, let's try to see what are the different types of EC2 instances. So there are multiple types of EC2 instances, and at this point of time, just try to understand, just try to sink in these things. You don't have to worry, oh, there are so many types of EC2 instances. How will I understand this? Eventually, throughout the course, whenever I'm using the AWS UI, I'll keep explaining you these things and you will get very familiarized with this. But to explain now, there are 5 different types which are very commonly used. There are previous generation EC2 instance types as well, but let's only learn about the current generation EC2 instance types. So you have general purpose EC2 instances, you have compute optimized EC2 instances, then you have memory optimized, storage optimized. So you have memory optimized, you have storage optimized, and you have accelerated compute. So this thing keeps changing. So, probably 2 years down the line, AWS might add 2 more different types of AWS EC2 instances. You don't have to worry about it. These things can be easily learned by using the AWS documentation. I'll also point you out to the documentation when we do the practicals. Now, what I want to tell you here is what are these different types? Now, you told me that Abhishek, EC2 is a very easy concept. You are just creating EC2 instance on AWS. Now, why you have so many things? So don't get confused. You have these things even when you are doing at your organization as well. For example, you have a physical server. Let's take example that you purchased 2 machines from IBM. Okay. So let's forget cloud for a while. And let's say that you are the system administrator who is taking care of all of these things. Let's say you have 2 instances that you have purchased, 2 physical servers, and IBM says that, hey, which type of server you want? Do you want memory optimized, or do you want compute optimized, or do you want storage optimized? Now, what does that mean? Like, this server that you have purchased is very rich in terms of memory. That means the memory operations are performed very quick. Whereas you have another thing which is compute optimized. What does compute optimized means? That means, this instance provides higher ratio of compute power when compared to memory. Whereas memory optimized, it provides high memory in terms of in terms of power. So this specific server that you have purchased are designed to handle more memory intensive workloads. For example, let me give you a basic example that you have some big data analytics applications, or you have some high performance computing applications. These days, people are using these Bitcoins and all of these things, which requires heavy compute thing, right? So for all of these things, there is a difference whether you want to go with compute optimized or whether you want to use memory optimized. So when you will go for memory optimized, when you want to use some real-time big data analytics or high performance computing. When you will use compute instance, when you want to use some machine learning models or gaming servers. In such cases, you will buy a compute oriented one from IBM. Similarly, what AWS tells you is, okay, you have requested an EC2 instance from me. Now, which type of EC2 instance do you want? Do you want an EC2 instance that is compute optimized, or do you want an EC2 instance that is memory optimized? Do you want an EC2 instance that is storage optimized? Or AWS will say, hey, don't worry about it. Do you want me to just give you a general EC2 instance? Right? So there is another term called general purpose, where, for example, throughout all of these series that we are doing, we'll just use a general purpose EC2 instance because we don't want any memory optimized or compute optimized. I'm not writing any gaming application and deploying it there, or I'm not writing any machine learning application. We are not doing any data analytics. So technically, throughout this demo or throughout this entire series, we'll not be using these memory. I mean, all of these instance types. We'll be only using general purpose instance types, but it is very important for you to understand in future when you join a company or in your current organization, if you want to implement AWS, during your interviews also, people will ask you what are the different types of EC2 instance. So you need to tell them that depending upon the application, if it is machine learning application, if it is data analytics application, or this application requires huge storage, depending upon that, I will choose what type of EC2 instance is required. Now, don't worry, the steps to create the EC2 instances are exactly same. The only difference is when you do it through the UI or when you do it through the CLI, you need to just select this instance type, and AWS will give you this instance type, and AWS will also charge you accordingly. Okay, so AWS will not give you a memory optimized instance at the same price as a general purpose instance, because AWS might have also purchased these servers at higher price, right? So this is something like the different types of EC2 instances. So you need to remember this. I will tell you that whenever someone asks you in the interviews, you need to have this back of your mind, that there is not only general purpose EC2 instance, but there is general purpose, compute optimized, memory optimized, storage optimized, as well as accelerated computing EC2 instances. So like I told you, don't worry much at this point of time. When we move to the next videos, when we do the practicals, we keep seeing these EC2 instances every day. So as part of this, like every day, whenever I go to the UI, I'll show you like, okay, when you select this specific thing, this is memory optimized, this is compute optimized, or this is general purpose. Now, the next thing that we want to learn is what is the concept of regions and availability zones. I can explain you very quickly, but I want to show it practically. So region in AWS is nothing but, like I told you, AWS have their data centers across the world, right? So AWS has their data center in India, AWS has their data center in US, Europe, and multiple other places. So this thing in AWS is called as regions. So AWS allows you, you can request AWS, like give me EC2 instance in Europe. In Europe, you can also tell AWS to give me in this specific region. Like what are the regions AWS supports? I'll show you. Don't worry. But for now, just understand that AWS has multiple regions. So why you need EC2 instance created in a specific region? There are multiple reasons. Like for example, you are working for a European client, and they want their data to be very sensitive, and they want to keep their data as close as possible to them. So what you will do is, as a DevOps engineer, you will create EC2 instance that is very close to your client location in the Europe. Similarly, you can create this EC2 instance in other regions like India. If you are in India and you want very less latency is nothing but the request will take a lot of time to move from one place to another place if your servers are far away. So this is the concept of regions, and inside each region, you have multiple availability zones as well. So in India, AWS does not have one single zone or one single data center. It has data centers in multiple places. This is called as availability zones. Now I'll show you these things on the AWS UI so that you will understand this in a much better way. So let's quickly move on to the practicals. We'll learn these things and we'll also do the practicals of deploying the application. Okay. Okay, now I've logged into the AWS console using my user details. And this is the thing that I'm talking about. If you click on this button here, you will see a lot of regions, right? What are these regions? Basically, these are the regions where AWS have their data centers across the world. For example, AWS says that they have data centers in North Virginia, Ohio, California, Oregon, Mumbai, Singapore, Sydney. And apart from this, you will see some 10 new regions which are not enabled by default because they are the new regions which are created after 2019 by AWS, and they need to be enabled. They are not enabled by default. We'll talk about these things in future classes. Right now, understand that these are the regions that AWS provides you out of the box, right? It's up to you to decide in which region you want to create EC2 instance. Now, why is this important? As I told you, let's say you have a European bank as your customer. Today, you are working for a European bank in your organization. There is a restriction with the European banks that they don't want to put their data outside their country or outside Europe. Okay, so for that reason, what they'll say is whenever you create an EC2 instance for me, create that EC2 instance within the Europe zone. Or let's say your customer is in Germany. So they'll ask you to create within the Germany. There is a region called Frankfurt, right? Frankfurt is in Germany. So you will create your EC2 instance in Germany so that your customer feels safe. Similarly, let's say your customer or your end customers or your client is in the US. And if you create an instance in Mumbai, what happens is whenever they try to request or get some information from the application, from the US, they have to make request to one of the servers in Mumbai. There will be latency. What is latency? Latency is nothing but the time that is taken for the request to reach the application and for the application and the server to send the response back to you. So this entire process, if there is a delay, that means there is high latency. If there is no delay, that means there is low latency, right? So everyone in this fast-paced world expects your application to have low latency, expects your server to send the response as quick as possible. That's why as a DevOps engineer, you will take care of these two things, security, latency, and you will create instance in the appropriate region. Whenever you are dealing with the free instance, you don't have to bother about it, because you are doing a proof of concept, you are trying to learn AWS, then that's okay. You can create all your instances in one region. But when you work for an organization, this is important. And once we understand the concept of region, there is another thing called availability zone, like I told you. Now, what happens with availability zone? You might ask me, like, Abhishek, they already have regions in multiple places across the world. Now, why they want availability zones? Answer is very simple here. Let's say there is a customer who has created an instance in North Virginia, and you have created that application for them, deployed that application in that region. Everything is going well. Customer is accessing the application, but one fine day, what happened is that there was a short circuit, or for some reason the region went down. There was some reliability issues with that site or North Virginia. Then what will happen is that your customer will face downtime and your application stops working. To avoid this problem, what AWS said is, even within a region, we will have multiple availability zones. For example, if you have selected a region called Mumbai, then AWS says that we have availability zone in south of Mumbai, in north of Mumbai. I'm just giving you an example. Okay. So similarly, what AWS says, in North Virginia, we have two availability zones called US East 1A, US East 1B. So instead of AWS revealing the server and data center location, what they will say is they will use some alphabets to denote that, okay, you have two availability zones within a region called US East 1A and US East 1B. So wherever you want, you can create the instance. If you want high availability, if you want that you don't want to run into issues like application not available, keep your data in a highly available mode, then you can even put your application in two availability zones. Even if one goes down, still customer can access your application. So we will be doing high availability data replication, all of these concepts in future classes. For now, understand the concept of regions and availability zones. I hope it is clear. Now let's go on to the creation of EC2 instance. So we discussed a lot about EC2 instance. We understood regions, what, why, everything about EC2 instance. Let's practically create one. So go to your AWS this console and click on EC2. In the last class, we did the same thing for IAM, and we found a service called IAM, and we started creating users and groups, right? Similarly, now as I enter EC2, you will find this service called EC2, which says virtual servers in the cloud. Exactly what we discussed 15-20 minutes ago. Click on this EC2 button. Click on the instances. Here, this is a EC2 dashboard where AWS tells you everything, like, these are the availability zones that are available, where you can create, you can enable additional availability zones, what are the instances that you have currently created, and some of these terms you might not be aware at this point of time. Security groups, snapshots, elastic IPs. We will cover these things as part of future classes. Don't worry about it. It's too quick to learn about these things at this point of time. Click on the instances button and click on launch instance. Now, when you click on launch instance, you have multiple options here and you have to fill a lot of details. I'll explain you each and every detail here. Try to understand it very clearly. First, provide the name of the instance. Let me call it as my first instance. After this, you can choose the operating system. Okay, so what does operating system mean here? If you understand the concept of Linux, whenever you create a EC2 instance, whether it's a virtual server or a physical server, you need to have an operating system. Operating system is the technically heart of your virtual machine. So we discussed in detail about operating systems, virtual machines, kernels in the free DevOps course, DevOps 0 to Hero course. I'll put the link below so that you can watch that video and understand the concept of virtual machines, Linux, kernel, and everything in detail. So AWS by default has all of these operating systems, which are basically distributions, right? Linux and Windows is an operating system. On top of it, you have different distributors. Like you can either pick Ubuntu, Amazon Linux, Red Hat, Solaris. You can pick anything here, Debian. So let's say I want to choose Ubuntu. You can choose anything of your choice. And once you choose Ubuntu, again AWS says which version of Ubuntu do you want, right? So make sure you always pick the free tier eligible things only. The reason is that if you pick anything else, then AWS will charge you for that. Okay, so pick free tier eligible resources and make sure that you understand the concept of free tier. Like AWS will not give you everything for free. There is a restriction for everything. For example, if you want to use EC2 instances, you can only use free tier EC2 instance for 750 hours only. That means even if you're using free tier resources, there is a time limit. The details are very clearly mentioned here. Whenever you use free tier, understand that AWS provides you only 750 hours of T2 micro, which is free tier available eligible instance. If you're using anything other than T2 micro, you'll be anyways charged. But if you're using T2 micro, which is 1 CPU and 1 GB RAM only, then you get 750 hours free for 1 month. It's not for the year, but it's 1 month. If you try to understand what is 750 hours, it's basically 24/7 and every day in a week. That means every day in a week throughout month, if you have your instance running, then there is no problem, but only one instance. Let's say I create an instance today and throughout the year, even if I keep that instance running, AWS will not charge me. But if you create one more instance, then AWS will charge you for that instance. So what people do is, let's say they want to use 2 to 3 instance, then they manage that time accordingly. So you can manage one instance for 2.5 hours, 200 hours, another instance for 200 hours, and rest instances for that specific time that is available. In that way you can manage, but you cannot exceed this specific time limit. So always make sure, it's a good habit. Whenever you are done with your proof of concepts, today you are learning something, once you are done with it, just try to turn off that instance or shut down that instance. Cool. You understood what this is about. Now there is another thing here which I'm just talking about, that the instance type. See here that free tier is only eligible for T2 micro, which belongs to family T2, 1 CPU, 1 GB memory. That's it. Like your laptop currently that you are using probably might be at least 4 GB, 6 GB, 8 GB. There are 32 GB laptops as well. What AWS providing us for free is a very small thing, right? But that is a free tier instance and we'll try to learn mostly with that free tier instance only. And let's say you have some AWS credits or your organization provides you AWS credits for learning, then you can go and try to explore other instances as well. For example, T2 X large, which is 4 CPU and 16 GB RAM. Like you can run very good applications on this. Even the memory intensive applications or applications that require a lot of CPU and memory can run on this instance. But on the T2 micro that we are creating, we cannot run a lot of instances applications. Then you have key value pair or key pair, which is the most important thing. And this key pair is actually the one that helps us log into the instance. What does that mean? Now you created one instance, let's say in North Virginia. How do you connect to that instance? By default, when you create an instance, AWS does not provide you password. The password authentication to the instance is disabled by default. The only way you can log into the instance is using key value pair. What is key value pair? Key value pair is nothing but a combination of public private key which you use to log into that specific instance. So the instance has public key, you will have the private key. Using the private key, you will log into that instance. And do not share this public private keys with anyone. Like even if you share public key, that's okay, but private key should not be shared with anyone. So keep this key pair with you and not to be shared with anyone. So I have a lot of key pairs here, but for the purpose of video, I'll create a new key pair. Just click on this button, create new key pair, use the default method RSA token and enter something that you will remember. For example, AWS login. Do not change any format and just click on the button, create key pair. So you can see here the key value pair is downloaded. I have something called AWS login.pem. I'll use that AWS login.pem or any of my previous credentials to log into this. But for the purpose of video, I'll show this with AWS login itself. Like I can use any previous key value pair. I can select anyone here. If I select Abhishek_DevOps, then I can log in with that key value pair. But let's use the same thing that we have just created, AWS_login. And here you have bunch of network settings, which we will not touch today. In today's video, we will just keep these things as is. In future video, when we learn about networking, when we learn about lot of concepts like security groups, inbound outbound traffic rules, route tables, then we will get to all of these things. But for now, do not change anything. Additionally, you can increase the storage. By default, the instance that AWS gives you has only 8 GB RAM. 8 GB is very less. Like for example, your laptops has 500, 1 TB, 2 TB, but AWS gives you very less. And for applications, I think that's very good enough. So we have 8 GB RAM here. Now just come here and click on the launch instance. And as you do it, your instance will be launched within minutes. So once the instance is launched, what will you do is just use the key value pair and log into the instance. If you are on Windows, then you need to install something like Putty, or you need to install MobiXterm or any other softwares. But if you are on Mac, then you can use the default terminal, right? So for the people who are new and who don't know about these softwares, just go to internet, search for Putty, or search like just say Putty download. You'll get this software called Putty. You can use this, or just click on the download button. Or you have something called MobiXterm, which is slightly more advanced, and you can keep sessions for 10 instances. You can store the passwords and all. So MobiXterm is another good option. Just go with the free version. Do not go with the professional edition. Download it and you can start using. There is nothing that you have to do. Just download this instance, and from there I'll show you how to do it. Perfect. Now let's see if the instance is launched or not. Go back and you will see that the instance is in running state. You have to wait for the instance to be in running state. Now click on the instance ID and you will get the complete details of the instance. So this is the public IP address. Using this public IP address, you can access the instance from outside world. This is private IP address that is very specific to the AWS network. So when we learn about the subnets and internal AWS networking, you will understand what is this private IP address and how can you use it. But for logging into the instance and learning AWS, what we will do is we will use this public IP to log into the instance and create the application, right? Next we will do is we will create an application and we will access the application from outside. So just copy it. And what you will do is take a terminal. Like I have a terminal by default. So I'll just bring up the terminal. So this is the terminal that I have. Again, you might, depending upon your laptop, you have different types of terminals. I'm not going into the details of that because that's a different discussion. But the popular ones are Putty, MobiXterm, or if you're on Mac, you can directly use the terminal like I'm using. So now if I do ls-ltr, I'll get the latest one. Okay, let me do this instead of this. I know the location of my PEM file. I have downloaded it, so it will be in the downloads folder. I'm already in the downloads folder. What I'll do is SSH. You see the command, you have to use the same one. SSH -i. Go to the location of your PEM file, which is mostly in the downloads folder. And what you will do is search for that PEM file, AWS login.pem. After that, because we have created an Ubuntu instance, the user ID by default available on that instance is Ubuntu. So I'll say Ubuntu @ the public IP address. So this is the public IP address, right? Now, as soon as I do it, I'll land into an error. So what is this error? You have additional permissions. For example, if I just say yes, you will notice that there is an error called the permissions for AWS login.pem are too open. That means it is a very sensitive file which has a lot of private key information or sensitive information, but you have kept the permissions to open. Just try to change that. What you need to do in the Linux classes, when we have learned Linux in the free DevOps free DevOps 0 to 0 classes, I have shown you that you can use a command called chmod to change the permissions of the file to 600. That means I have also explained the what does this 6 stands for, what does this 0 stand for, and the other 0 stand for. So it will be too, I mean, we'll need more time to talk about it. So if you don't know about this one, please watch that previous video and just provide the file name. So now the permissions will be changed and I will be able to access. So now I'm logged into the instance, right? So I can do technically anything on this instance. I can just say, who am I? And it will say that you are Ubuntu user on this specific server, right? So this is the same server. Once you log in, AWS will show you the private IP address of that server, but you have logged in through the public IP address, right? So now you have technically inside the EC2 instance. And if you want to switch to the root user, you can just say sudo switch user and you will go to the root user. Or if you want to stay back with the Ubuntu user, you can also be there. Now what I'll do is, as soon as I log into the EC2 instance, the thing that you need to do is you have to update the packages on this instance. If you are on Ubuntu user, all that you need to do is sudo apt update. Or if you are on the root user, like I was, sudo su minus, then you can directly say apt update. So sudo is needed if you are on the Ubuntu user. It is not needed if you are not. So apt update. All the packages, if there are any old packages, they will get updated. It's a good practice. Whenever you log into a new instance, try to update the packages so that you are up to date. Whenever you download something, you get the latest version of the package. So now my apt repositories are updated. And what I'll do, like I told you, is I'll try to deploy an application and show it to you. So I thought, why should I deploy any simple application? Anyways, we are trying to learn AWS and all of us are DevOps engineers. So what I'll do is I will try to install Jenkins on this machine and I'll try to access that Jenkins from the browser. Go to the browser and search for install Jenkins. So all that you do is install Jenkins on Ubuntu. Go to the official Jenkins page, click on this one, Linux, right? You have different distributions. So the one that we are looking for is Ubuntu. You can choose either long-term support or weekly release, anything is fine. But before you install this, there is a prerequisite that you need to install Java. So let's install Java first. I'll just do apt. If you are on Ubuntu, don't forget to use sudo. If you are not, just say apt install open JDK -11 -JDK. So I already know this. If not, you can Google and try to find how to install Java. So once this is installed, we'll verify if Java is installed or not. So just say Java ---- version. Perfect. Java is installed. Now let's try to install Jenkins. Just copy this one and paste it here. So it will take a couple of minutes because Jenkins tries to download a few things. And once Jenkins is installed, what we need to do is try to see if Jenkins server is up and running. Like you can do with any other application. There is no problem at all. But because we are DevOps engineers, I thought I'll show you with the right example. So we will start the Jenkins service if it is not started. And once the Jenkins service is started, you can try to access it from the browser. There is a catch that by default, it will not be accessible. I'll tell you why, and I'll show you how to solve that problem as well. It's a very simple one. Okay, so Jenkins is also installed. Now let us try to see if the Jenkins service is running or not. So I can just say systemctl Jenkins status. Sorry, systemctl status Jenkins. Perfect. Jenkins is up and running. Now all that we need to do is understand the port of Jenkins. By default, Jenkins runs on a port called 8080. So you can access the application. Like what you need to do is go to the AWS, copy this public IP, and going to your browser, just enter http:// port of IP address of your EC2 instance. I think it's copied wrong. Let's copy one more time. This is the IP address of the EC2 instance. Copy it. HTTP, copy the IP address, :8080. Ideally, your application should be running, but it will not be accessible. The reason is that, like I told you, whenever you create anything on AWS, Apart from creating the instance, running the application, there are a lot of settings, right? If you go to this EC2 instance, you will see there are a few things like the VPC that is attached to it. You will see that there is a subnet that is attached to it. What does that mean? Your application by default, it is not accessible to the external world. There are a lot of security things, networking things, lot of things that we'll learn in the future classes. But for now, what we will do is I will show you how to open that port 8080, which you can just understand for now. In future, when we talk about the security groups and networking, you will understand this in a much detailed way. But for now, what you will do is there is something called as security tab. If you go there, you have inbound traffic rules and outbound traffic rules. Inbound is the request that is coming inside AWS to your EC2 instance. Outbound is the request that are going outside. In my case, I want to just access that EC2 server. So I'll just go to the security group, inbound traffic rules. I'll edit the inbound traffic rules and I will tell that I will add a new rule saying that allow custom TCP port 8080 from anywhere in the world. I'll just say anywhere IPv4 and I'll just save the rule. Okay, you will understand about these rules in a much detailed way in future. Don't worry. Right now, I'm just doing this to make sure that I'll show you that my application is accessible. See, Jenkins is installed and it said me that this is the location. You don't have to bother because in this class, we are not learning Jenkins, but we are learning how to, like, I'll show you. This is my initial password. And as soon as I enter, my Jenkins server is accessible. So just enter the password here and click on the enter button. See, the Jenkins console is accessible and Jenkins is up and running. So this is your first application that you have deployed. Congratulations. If you are a new one to AWS, let's say you have just started learning, then you have already achieved something. You learned how to deploy your first application and that to Jenkins on AWS and access it from outside world. In the future videos, we'll be learning much more interesting things. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you have any feedback for me, put that in the comment section. Happy learning. See you all in the next video. Take care. Bye.